This is what I can't believe, and you're their star witness. You're their first witness.
Mr.
You're
Jordan.
the guy. You're the guy based on this, based on, I mean, I've seen church prayer chains that are easier to understand than this. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yarmouk on September 1st, 20. This all happens, by the way. This all happens, by the way, in Warsaw, where Vice President Pence meets with President Zelensky. And guess what?
Taylor,
they didn't talk about any linkage either.
I don't consider myself a star witness for anything.
They do. You don't.
No, I don't. I'm responding to your question.
Please don't interrupt the witness.
But I think, Mr. Jordan, the way I read this, he remembers it the same way I do.
Yeah, and it's real clear, right?
It's very clear to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Taylor.
The Ukrainian president stood in front of the world press and repeatedly, consistently, over and over again, interview after interview, said he had no knowledge of military aid being withheld, meaning no quid pro quo, no pressure, no demands, no threats, no blackmail, nothing corrupt. And unlike the first 45 minutes that we heard from the Democrats today, that's not secondhand information, it's not hearsay, it's not what someone overheard Ambassador Sondland say. That was his direct testimony. Ambassador Taylor, do you have any evidence to assert that President Zelensky was lying to the world press when he said those things? Yes or no?
Mr. Ratcliffe, if I can respond.
My time is short.
Your time
yes
is
or
short.
no?
That's right. I have no reason to doubt what the president said in his.
Okay, very good. So in this impeachment hearing today, where we impeach presidents for treason or bribery or other high crimes, where is the impeachable offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Shout it out. Anyone?
You testified in your prior testimony that you have not had any contact with the President of the United States. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Ms. Taylor, Mr. Kent, have you had any contact with the President of the United States?
I have not.
So not only no conversations with the President of the United States about Ukraine, you've not had any contact with the President of the United States, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you both know that this impeachment inquiry is about the President of the United States, don't you? I mean, the man that neither one of you have had any contact with, you're the first up witnesses. Well, we're not in a court, gentlemen, and if we were, the Sixth Amendment would apply, and so would rules on hearsay and opinion, and most of your two testimonies would not be admissible whatsoever.
Corruption in Ukraine is endemic, correct?
That's correct.
The company Burisma, its leader, Sochevsky, he has a little bit of a storied history of corruption, doesn't he?
Mr. Zlochevsky was Minister of Energy from 2010 to 2012 under the pro-Russian government, and he used his regulatory authority to award gas exploration licenses to companies that he himself controlled. That would be considered an act of corruption in my view, yes.
So Hunter Biden's added to the board of Burisma. Now, do you think that creates a problem that Burisma may be adding people to its board for protection purposes?
Sir, I work for the government. I don't work in the corporate sector.
What did President Zelensky actually do to get the aid? The answer is nothing. He did nothing. He didn't open any investigations. He didn't call Attorney General Bill Barr. He didn't do any of the things that House Democrats say that he was being forced and coerced and threatened to do. He didn't do anything because
the whole point of our public hearings is to present these facts to the public and to let the general public really see the facts for themselves and to understand why we have chosen to move forward with the impeachment inquiry. I think what we heard today was just astounding and devastating news for the president, for anyone that was in the administration that was really partaking. And frankly, this is devastating for the country. Our national security has been compromised. Our elections are potentially compromised. And so I think right now what Republicans have to do is decide what their role is going to be in the scope of history, because we will look back at this time and really, truly examine the moral decisions that each member of Congress has decided to make.
So what jumped out at you, Congresswoman, about the most devastating new information that emerged?
Well, you know, it's been discussed, but this call with Ambassador Sondland and President Trump, it's a personal call that our witnesses testified in aid as overhearing, where Trump was personally invested in these investigations. I think it has added a layer of proximity. You know, one of the ways that the president could have potentially tried to get out of this situation is saying, put several degrees of separation between him and some of this illicit activity. But what we heard today was that he himself was making and partaking in some of these phone calls, not just Giuliani, not just anyone else in administration, but him. And that really adds a much more disturbing degree of the involvement that he had in using the powers of government to create politically motivated investigations.
At that news conference with the Turkish president, the president said he doesn't remember any such call, poo-pooing the whole thing. What do you say to the president?
Well, if he doesn't remember making a call like that, I would be quite concerned, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I think a lot of what the president's reactions tend to be deflecting, but I think it is quite telling that he is not being defensive about this. This is an extraordinarily serious allegation that is being made by a person who works in his administration. And so if he were to defend this, he should do so quite forcefully. The allegation that's coming from someone within his own administration is extraordinarily serious. That's not something that you remember or not remembering whether you did or didn't do.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did. And I take responsibility for those parts of it that I should. But Jane, it was like applying for a job and getting 66 million letters of recommendation and losing to a corrupt human tornado. So of course he's obsessed with me. And I believe that it's a guilty conscience in so much as he has a conscience.
Who wants that one? We talked about this off air. Does the Democratic nominee in 2020 want Hillary Clinton speaking at their convention in
Milwaukee, Wisconsin? Hello, hello, hello.
Let alone do they want her out
coming
in
out
public?
swinging in the middle of impeachment inquiry week? Yeah.
So,
No? We don't think so? All right.
to be determined.
To be determined. There we go.
In the politically important state of Wisconsin, we watched the impeachment hearing with 6 voters who are undecided about 2020.
Do you think that this day was problematic for the president?
It definitely opens some doors. It opens up a lot more to discussion.
Each of these 6 say they could go for a Republican or for a Democrat in the next presidential election. And regarding how this day went for the president,
I think it could have been a lot worse. And I really thought it would be a lot worse.
they may have watched the same hearing, but our group had very different takes.
I think that overall, the testimony that Ambassador Taylor gave is making me think and doubt Donald Trump's intentions behind his actions.
I think they'd have to have a lot harder evidence against him to think that this was impeachable.
I feel like he's leaving a wake behind him of problem after problem after problem.
How many of you were impressed with the witnesses? All of you. So you believe what they said. Did any of you doubt what they said? Yet not all of you think it was a bad day for the president. And they said some things that were pretty negative about the president.
They did, but they were only able to say what they heard or what they gleaned through multiple different venues. And that's what I mean about the president not providing evidence to defend himself.
Well, that leads me to this question, because you set it up very well. It's a catch-22, isn't it? The Republicans are saying you don't have firsthand knowledge, but the Trump administration is not letting people with firsthand knowledge testify. Does that trouble you?
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of kind of like the secret courts of Russia where I was born. I mean, you had people during the Soviet Union time, they weren't allowed to bring witnesses forward because those witnesses might discredit the government.
It would be good to have all the evidence heard. I think that would solidify the answer.
Did you think the White House is making a mistake by telling people they can't testify?
It causes a problem, certainly, as if they were covering up something or hiding something.
One person in our panel says she could potentially vote for a Republican for president, just not Donald Trump. The rest say Trump could still get their votes. They all say they will continue to watch the hearings.
Who was this a better day for, Republicans or Democrats?
Republicans.
Democrats.
Republicans.
Neither.
Neither.
Republican.
Democrats.